So the clear audio that I'm hearing is the Beauty and the Beast song, Tale as Old as Time, and it's not the one that you might think. So let's dive in. If you are a people pleaser, if you have kept the peace, if you've been worried about in your lifetime being a good girl, even if you don't want to admit it, but the point that I found actually involved the betrayal wound. So there is a fear of being exposed or being publicly embarrassed. Some people might say it's a persecution wound, but the way that I discovered it was I had a trigger come up today about like being prepared. And I took Tucker to the park and I couldn't find the ball, but I put the ball somewhere so it wouldn't fall out of the car. And then I remembered, but I got all frustrated and angry thinking that I lost the ball or came out of the car and then we wouldn't be able to play fetch. And I'm preparing for a client. So doing it the right way, right? And our culture has reinforced that, right? School reinforced that. But when I went back to it, around 6 or 7 is when I started being made fun of, mostly for my weight because I hit puberty early. So I didn't look like a lot of the other little girls, and even by 2 of my best friends. And then we moved to Minnesota, and I told my parents, I'm not going, I'll stay with grandma. Like, I knew it was going to be bad, and it was. We were back in Ohio in less than 3 years. But that moment taught me not to trust myself. And before that, it reinforced that something was wrong with me, that I wasn't good enough, that, I had to like keep the peace. And a lot of times it's because I could sense what was coming. So I ended up diving deeper and deeper into my body to protect myself. So gaining weight, having different things happen like that. And so most of weight represents being armored, being protected. And for many, not trusting. Am I a good person? And when you don't feel like you're enough or you're a good person or you're going to do it right, then you start holding that you're a bad person and you're looking out there for ways for you to prove that you're a good person. Does that make sense? I know that's a lot. But essentially what came up this morning is I asked who was present, and it was like my 7-year-old. And the developmental thing to understand about your 7-year-old is that is right around 2nd grade. So it's when between that 1st and 2nd grade age, when you start having to be more responsible for homework, grades became more important, doing it right became more important, how you compared to others, maybe having sleepovers, which was another big thing that came up when I was exploring this, that spending the night with other girls, I didn't trust them. And sometimes they would do mean stuff to you. And I just had a very open heart. I was very naive as a little kid, but I also had a very strong gauge of right and wrong. And I would stick up for people if they got picked on. But a lot of times when I got picked on, it created this the only time I would say that I really experienced freeze. And so eventually that became fight. And so the not understanding why people would make fun of you and why we would treat each other that way became anger. And it wasn't safe to be sad in my house because my mom didn't want to feel the grief of losing her father and being divorced and all of these things. So anger was much more acceptable. So the road that my energy took was much more in the masculine. And I'm a Sag Sun Leo rising, so I already have masculine energy. So my Libra moon became a people pleaser. It became a peacekeeper. It became the one that handled things. It became the one that basically just started stuffing and suppressing emotion. And so this morning when that came up, am I a bad person? Anger is not something that women deal well with. We shame other women for being angry. And especially, I think, in different cultures, this comes up as much more of a stereotype, different cultures, ethnicities. But being a good girl means you can't be angry. And that is something that is deeply ingrained in patriarchal society and religion and, that idea of submission, that idea of not fighting. And so that also shows up in different power dynamics in romantic relationships, regardless of gender. And so, really untangling this, you can like wrestle with all the whys and whatever, but how you untangle this is to ask, when was the first time that I felt this betrayal wound, the fear of being exposed, the fear of being embarrassed, the fear of not being enough? And when I go back, you know, I never was really worried about being adopted. I knew from like 2 or 3 on that I was adopted. But there is this idea, right, that if you could be given away, that it could happen again at any time. Or like even the idea of being disowned, not being enough. But when it was really reinforced was when I was 7, when we moved to Minnesota, when my first friend in first grade made fun of me. And a lot of times what was happening is my friends would make fun of me because their siblings made fun of them. So the power dynamic was they could be in with their siblings if they had someone else to pick on. And so when you wind it back, some of our first friendships, our first experiences at school are the root of this wound. I know that that was like a long way around, but when you look at your chart, my wound is Chiron in Aries, the wound of self. And so for many people that have Chiron in Aries, if you're part of Gen X, you really didn't have your own mirror. So you used people out here to figure out who you were. And the sovereignty, the reclaiming of self is actually you deciding that you don't give a shit what anybody else thinks, listening to what you're called to do, and learning to trust yourself again in your guidance. A lot of people are moving into their return that have Taurus and Chiron and Taurus. And this is sort of the wound of loss, abandonment, losing material things. So really, the wound healing is about realizing that if you are in your sovereignty, if you are in alignment, you can never lose anything. So most people ended up with this wound losing themselves in relationships. The wound of self with Aries, it's like almost like you can't sense yourself. So you're looking for a mirror. And so every Chiron wound kind of has this. I know a lot of people that are in their Saturn returns right now that have Saturn and Aries. Many of them also have their North Node in Libra and Chiron in Libra, which is, it's like looking for balance, finding balance in your life to be yourself and to kind of hold strong boundaries for yourself. Anywhere you have a Libra placement, that is where boundaries are going to need to be enacted in your life. So you can look at that in your chart. Anyway, this is what I was called to share. And basically, I asked if this part of me wanted to go back to the light or be integrated. This part of me wants to go back to the light, so I'll be working with that today. I have a Reiki session with a friend and a trade that I'm doing later. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out.